Welcome to Catch and Go. In today's telecast, we're going to go into the title called God's Prophecy Concerning the Liberation of Ukraine. We're going to make this part 2. We did part 1, we did the conclusion. This is going to be part 2. Now, let me give you the following PowerPoint, and then we're going to go straight into this title, God's Prophecy Concerning the Liberation of Ukraine. PowerPoint number 1, write the word supernaturally. PowerPoint number 2, global shift. PowerPoint number 3, God's timeline, God's forecast. PowerPoint number 5, God's warning to China. PowerPoint number 6 is Checkmate. But PowerPoint number 7 is God is in full control. Let's begin. But before we start, I want you to understand that I just did part 3 of the title War in the Dark, and I forgot to give you my PowerPoint text, which was Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 8 to part 3 of War in the Dark. A time to love, a time to hate, a time for peace, and a time for war, and all the chips are in place. And what you got here and what's shaping is World War III. Let us continue. PowerPoint number 1, supernaturally. I meant to tell you below that, right, the rainbow is about to appear. PowerPoint number 2, I said global shift and the shifting of alliance. PowerPoint number 3, of course, God's timeline. PowerPoint number 4, God's forecast. PowerPoint number 5, God's warning to China. PowerPoint number 6, checkmate. PowerPoint number 7, God's in full control. Now, somewhere on your paper, you simply write the global war in the Arctic, okay? Next, and below to that, you write Ukraine, and then below it, a city of believers. Then you write the removal. Then you're going to put also on your paper banks collapsing and banks being consolidated. Then you're going to write down the word sovereignty. Then below the word sovereignty, you're going to write the Taiwan Straits. Then somewhere in your paper, you're going to write down what the Lord said to America. And God said to America that these are alarming moments to be alert and to be vigilant. Let us get started. And one of the things before I go into PowerPoint number 1, supernaturally, I want you to understand that I'm going to do my very best to pronounce this word. And the word is the Calagan River, that section of the Calagan. And what the glory of God is saying, that NATO is going to quickly shift to that area. They're going to beef up security. They're going to line up in a zone with a U.S. military might. And perhaps you think that more than likely the U.S. is not going to be the one leading that attack, but you're going to see where there's going to be an invasion, but they're going to attack what the Lord is showing me, Moscow. And the Lord is saying that the NATO is shifting not only to the Arctic, over to the Black Sea, and they're going to line up and they're going to go to war with Russia and with Vladimir Putin. And I have said for PowerPoint number 1, supernaturally. And God said that he was fed up and that he had enough with Vladimir Putin and that his time was up. But that God will eliminate Vladimir Putin in the Ezekiel 38 war. Perhaps, who knows, maybe God may change his mind and take out Vladimir Putin a whole lot sooner than we think so. Because God is tired and fed up of Vladimir Putin blowing up hospitals, not only killing civilization, blowing up buildings and infrastructure, and blowing up all of Ukraine. Civilization dying at the hands of one man who's got a stallion mentality. And I made it very clear that when it comes to President Trump, look, when you talk about giving the Russians 50 days, God sits back and God starts to think about the time when God said to Samuel, Samuel, go, because I see all this complaining and all this whining, and I'm going to give the Israelites a king. So he gave them Saul. He gave the Israelites a king. He gave them King Saul. And God is sitting here saying that just as he gave the prophet Samuel specific instructions to give Saul, Saul went and rebelled, and Saul went against God, and Saul practically went away from God. But that's not what I'm saying when it comes to Donald Trump. And I'm not saying Trump is got a spirit of a King Saul. No. He's a great man. He's a good man. He's got a good heart and a good president. But what God is saying, that he's had enough, even when it comes to Trump talking about giving them 50 days. Look, it's time to flex. God said that it was time for the president and for the U.S. to start to flex its military might. And also when it comes to the 21st century, especially with biometric chips. And when it comes to your alliance, a Western alliance, and not only talking about diplomacy, when diplomacy, look, doesn't exist anymore. What you got here is nations coming together, world leaders looking to how to rectify the situation. Not only to lower things down, the only thing that's going to happen is God's going to escalate. And there is an escalation when it comes to the war between Iran and Israel, in the October 7 war, and the war that I said from the very beginning that will go into a global war when it comes to the Black Sea. That's it. And I have said over and over that you also got something shaping up very quickly besides the Taiwan Strait, and that is the war in the Indo-Pacific. And I say that more than likely that's going to be the next war. But also keep in mind that I have said that the Lord just said to me, but I said that we needed to pay attention because of more than 4 or 5 years ago, I said that the global Middle East will go into a flame of fire and it will be engulfed, and you're going to see a global crisis in the Middle East. And God said to me, look what the Lord said. This is the first time that God has spoken. God said to me, the Abraham Accord. But let's get to this title, God's prophecy concerning the liberation of Ukraine. And I have said over and over, and I want to make this clear for the final time. And I'm not going to keep repeating. I've been repeating things when it comes to this one area for the last 5 years, 10 years or so. And that is this, that we will always respect and honor from a noble heart world leaders. I don't care what leader it is and from what country. We will honor. We will honor their country, their culture, their people, their immigration. And what I want to say is this, that I have nothing against Vladimir Putin and President Xi. But God said that these two don't understand that there's a God that exists and that he still reigns. But I want to move on. And God said that he will remove Vladimir Putin pretty soon. And look, when it comes to what we're beginning to see around the world, we're beginning to see the global shifting of alliance. We're beginning to see the global shifting when it comes to global currency and trying to cause the dollar to collapse. And what I want to say here is, what you got here is a revived Roman Empire and a one world order and a new world order being established. Let me continue. When it comes to Russia, I have said over and over, and I talked about it, I believe, conclusion of part 1. And I said that when it comes to God's prophecy concerning the liberation of Ukraine, when it comes to the Russians will break trust. They will not only break trust, but India needs to get ready, the nation of India, because more than likely you're going to see that the Russians are going to break trust, and they're going to go and not only come on board, which they already are, and agree with China and President Xi. So India as a nation needs to keep in mind what we're saying here on this telecast today. Another thing, I have said that it's in God's timeline and God's revealing his forecast that what's going to happen is the rainbow, and there is a global shift that's coming and a global awakening. And not only God bringing about a quick, rude awakening, quicker than you think so. Civilization is going to be more in the bubble, more fragile than ever before, because God spoke in part 3 of the title, War in the Dark. God spoke and made it very clear. God said that we're going to experience what he said was what? The coming persecution. And then he went on to say the beheading. Now, another thing that you're going to remember. This is something you're going to remember. And it's PowerPoint number 5. I have been speaking for a number of years and for quite some times and for many years when it comes to PowerPoint number 3, 4, and PowerPoint number 2. PowerPoint number 5, God's warning to China and President Xi that Taiwan is no piece of cake and no walkover. Look, I have said that President Xi makes a miscalculated mistake like Vladimir Putin. And if President Xi thinks that he's going to overnight, or in a year or so, or in 6 months, or in 3 months, he's going to be able, the Lord said to me, even in 3 years, he thinks that he's able or going to take over Taiwan in 3 years. The grace of God is saying to President Xi, you're in for a rude awakening, because Taiwan is all prepped up and more prepared than what the North Korea thinks, what the Russian thinks, what Iran thinks. God said to me what Iraq thinks, what those nations thinks. And the reasons I mentioned those nations before China, because God is simply saying that those nations at some point they will come on board and help China how to invade Taiwan, and there's going to be a major collision and a global collision in the South China Sea. And the grace of God showed me and said, even when it comes to the Philippines and the waters over in the Philippines, when it comes not only to the sovereignty of the waters of the Philippines, but the sovereignty of the nations of the Philippines. That's why I said that when it comes to Southeast Asia and those ASEAN leaders and the nations of Southeast Asia, there's only one nation really that is fighting the battle and fighting from a place of good faith and good concern. That is the Philippines. And they're not only sending a clear message to Beijing that they're not going to give up their waters. They're not going to give up that space. They're not going to agree with the 9-dash line, and that China is not going to dominate and take over their waters. And we need to be proud of the Philippines and the president of the Philippines. I want to make that very clear. But the glory of God is saying very clear to Beijing that you are in for a very big, rude awakening. Because if you think you're going to take over Taiwan, that's not going to happen. I have said over and over that America, with its ally, with NATO, who needs to pivot quickly, not only to the Black Sea, in the Arctic, but also flex its military might, spread out its troops, NATO, along with U.S., and what I want to say with its alliance, Western Alliance, and with Australia and New Zealand, needs to beef up security, especially in the Indo-Pacific. What I am saying basically is this, that God is putting President Xi not only on alert and warning you in these alarming moments, and a time in which we're living in the dark period, gloom and doom, war breaking out, and it will break out everywhere. God is saying to Beijing, you better be careful if you attack Taiwan, because the U.S. needs to send a message to President Xi that they will stand shoulder to shoulder with Taiwan, with the Philippines, and with the nations that totally agree that every nation should protect the sovereignty of the nation, the sovereignty of the waters, the banks of the waters and the rivers along their nations, and understand that they're not going to allow Beijing to this one thing. Beijing and President Xi simply wants to dominate the shipping lanes and the shipping ports. It is time that I have said over and over, and God is showing me 2020. I have said since 2020, it is time for you to for nations to take your shipping ports and your shipping lanes, because that is the President Xi in China's trump card. I want to make that very clear. And nations needs to wake up. Now, for PowerPoint number 6, I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time. I said it's a game of chess, and God will score checkmate, because these are the final phase, final mobilization. And God is simply saying to the entire world to prepare, because we're going to go into major catastrophic event. And God has said over and over that America needs to be more resilient and to remember what God said, that these are alarming moments, and to be alert and to be vigilant. And I have said that what you're going to see is the removal, because God spoke so powerful in part 3, War in the Dark, where God said that we are about to see and experience the greatest moment ever, since God not only started to work from Genesis chapter 1, and since the time that God started to replenish the earth. God said replenish the earth, and God said replenishing the souls of every born again believer. And God is showing me purifying. He's purifying not only the souls of those believers, those Gentiles, of the bride, and the 144,000 in that end time remnant. And God's purifying, and God's watering the souls, because God said to me that when He sees every born again believer, that He sees you with no blemish whatsoever. He sees you with no blemish. He sees you as a God-fearing man and woman, a world leader that has got no blemish, no corruption in you. And that's why God is concerned with world leaders. Also with those in the body of Christ in Ephesians 4:11. And the grace of God is saying that He's going to enhance, that's the word He just said now, and purify His church to a whole different level. And God said not only to be confrontational, but also the grace of God is saying to put you in the battlefield, in the front line. And that's why in 2020 I said that was coming the time of what? The time of confrontation, and those that God consider those in frontier. Not only those that will be in the front, in the battlefield. And God said to me that the last will be first, and the first will be last. Now I begin to close with this. As the grace of God said that He wants not only every born again believer and all of civilization to understand that simply He is trying to not only give you enough time, because in my title, War in the Dark, the first PowerPoint was what? Doomsday Clock. What was the second one? Awakening, when God spoke at 4:10. And God is simply saying that you need to wake up. If you're a backslider, if you are lukewarm, because the glory of God saying that the greatest moment in all of modern history on earth is about to happen since the time of civilization. The greatest moment since the time that He not only put Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, since the time He spoke to Noah and made a covenant with Noah concerning the rainbow. And then there was Noah's 3 sons, where his sons, not only that's how the population of all kinds of race, religion, creed, color, and nations and people was formed through Noah's 3 sons. And God is simply saying that we also need to pay attention to the Arctic, and that when it comes to the banks are going to collapse. And I don't want to continue. I'm going to close with this one thing, and that is that I have said over and over that we here on Catch and Go will always honor world leaders here inside America, outside America. We will honor every single world leader. We will honor your country. We will honor those that work in your country in immigration. But what I want to say to you is this. Here on Catch and Go, we don't believe in compromising. We believe in God's uncompromising word. And if you do your history and your track record, you will see that everything that we have spoken has come to pass, and there are things in the making that are about to be fulfilled. And God has said over years, since the time that he built me from scratch, the Holy Spirit, God has been saying that not one single word that I speak will fail or return void. You know why? Because I have said all these years, the words that we speak comes from the very breath, from the very spirit of the living God. And you're going to say, so what's the point of speaking again this title, God's prophecy concerning the liberation of Ukraine? Because God is about to liberate all of Ukraine and fulfill that prophecy. And God is sending a stern warning that, and made it personal, eliminate Vladimir Putin. And more than likely, it could be in the Ezekiel 38 war, will then eliminate all of the Russians, destroy totally all the Russians and Vladimir Putin, because they will come together with Turkey. And you have seen that President Erdogan, the president of Turkey, just flew in to Moscow to have a meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. And remember, these are two of many nations that will go up and invade the northern part of Israel. And let me make this very clear, because God brought this up, and I want to make this very clear. You just saw that Israel and Bibi, they decided to begin to bomb Syria again and bomb Damascus in the fulfillment of the Isaiah 17 prophecy. But you need to wake up a whole lot quicker. Who's behind this whole thing? And why did Bibi in Israel begin to bomb the nation of Syria again? And the reason is that the only one behind that, and behind this whole thing, is the one that just flew over to Moscow, to Russia, and that is President Erdogan from Turkey, because his greatest desire is to build the Ottoman Empire. And before I said that, God said the Iman. That's what God said. And you're going to see the rise of jihadists. I'm going to simply say, there's no reason whatsoever why would Israel want to immediately begin to attack Syria. There's got to be a purpose. There's got to be a divine reason why. And the reason is that Bibi, with the nation of Israel, with its military, can see what Erdogan is doing. And that's why Erdogan was also the one behind ousting Assad, the former president of Syria. And what you got here is that the greatest desire that Erdogan wants to see is that he builds the Ottoman Empire. And you got the Turkey president dreaming big that one day he builds the Ottoman Empire. He puts together a coalition of nations. They come together, form an allegiance with the Antichrist, with 10 Arab nations. And I have said that those leaders in the BRICS are not the 10 kings. They are 10 men from 10 different tribes, from 10 different locations, out of the Middle East, out of the Muslim nations, that are not known, that the grace of God said will come to be known. Those will be the 10 kings. And the confederacy, God said, the 10 kings. And that's why God said at the beginning of this telecast, God said what? The harlot and the beast, and you got the Antichrist and the revived Roman Empire. But I wanted to come back and speak on God's prophecy concerning the liberation of Ukraine, because I have said that every single thing that we speak will never fail. And the words that I speak comes from the very breath and from the very spirit of the living God, who's made an announcement, one of the greatest and the greatest proclamation and declaration and decree in the title War in the Dark, that what you're going to see in civilization and all of humanity is the greatest moment. And God said these words to me: the revisitation of what? The revisitation of the King of Kings and the Lords of Lords. We're going to see and experience the greatest moment when the rainbow is going to appear, and Jesus is simply going to clear the clouds. And God said to me, and the bridegroom leaving his chamber and God putting Vladimir Putin on notice that he's got your number, you on his radar, he's got your target, and he simply, more than likely, is going to eliminate you in the Ezekiel 38 war, because you also have not only a stallion mentality, and God sending a stern warning to President Xi that I told you, PowerPoint number 5. God's warning to China that Taiwan is no piece of cake or walkover. God is sending an alarming and stern and precise, with great clarification, straight down to the point, no in between, to President Xi, that if you think you can take Taiwan Strait, God is simply saying, go ahead and see, because the grace of God will intervene, and you're going to see that God will spare and save the sovereignty of that nation, the sovereignty of Taiwan, the Taiwan people, but also God will save all of Taiwan like he will save all and liberate the nation of Ukraine, because Kyiv is a city of believers. And get ready, because God said what we're going to see is the Lord will clear the clouds and the bridegroom coming out of his chamber. I leave it right here. May the Lord so richly bless you. Remember to click like, share, subscribe, hit on the bell to receive our latest telecast, and I catch you on my telecast of Catch and Go. God bless.